Welcome to this week's press preview alongside Justin Conn. I'm Aren Dow. It's been a couple weeks since we've done one, and going back and looking at Moreau and their run, and kind of a disappointing game there at State in their final game. They had that close win against Tuscola, 22-20. Then a lot of uncharacteristic things that Moreau did in that state championship game. I know you were there to see it. It's kind of hard to watch a little bit.
Oh yeah, it was. And I think the most frustrating thing I wrote about this was that Moreau moved the ball. This wasn't like against Morrison and Sterling Newman those 2 years where they just went there and were physically overmatched. They weren't physically overmatched in that game. They moved the ball. They actually outgained Eastland Pearl City, and that was with that long loss on the bad snap.
It's like 23 yards.
Yeah, and so you take that away, or if that's only like a 2-yard loss, or Hockaday was able to get back there and throw it away or whatever, make an incomplete pass. Then you're talking about they actually outgained them pretty seriously. Now, the turnovers, I think that you can give Eastland Pearl City some of the credit for that. That's not just Moreau mistakes.
Sure.
Those were, they had a great secondary, and I think that he made some bad passes. Hockaday did, but great plays from Eastland Pearl City, and the fumbles. You got to hit Jack Hockaday pretty hard. He's a strong guy. You got to hit him pretty hard to make him fumble the ball. And I think one of them was more of just it kind of slipped out of his hands. But on the other one, the guy, hit the football and it came out. So, they did their share. And then their passing game, I thought, was well beyond what I think. They have both these things, but the way their quarterback threw into the wind like he did, I thought that was really the key to the game.
Yeah, and you kind of look back at this season and you think, well, man, it had such high expectations for Moreau. But coming into the season, it was basically, you had Jack Hockaday, you had a couple other seniors, but it was a really young team that had to replace just a massive senior class from last year. I think, we all kind of knew, Moreau was going to be good, but I think that you kind of saw a lot of the younger players, keep Moreau at that level of, we need to be competitive at the state championship game, and so disappointing game for sure. But I think that the fact that you do have a lot of those younger players that did kind of take those roles, that the Moreau was still kind of able to achieve what they've had the last 4, 5, 6, 9 years.
Well, they had to make it through a tough regular season, and there were times during the regular season that I looked at that team and thought, "Now they're not going to state." And I do think that it probably wasn't at the talent level as last year's team or the year before that or those even the 2009 and 10 teams. I don't think that they were at that talent level, but you had probably the best player that they've seen in this whole run in Jack Hockaday. And I thought that Coach Jostis did a great job this year of building it around not only his talents but also what defenses were going to do to try to counteract that. They tried to counteract with a lot of fakes and some, like you said, some guys stepping up like Chad Howell and Logan Alsup and Sam Stogsdill. They did enough, to kind of take some of the pressure off Jack. So, yeah, it was a great run, and I think that they just kind of feel like, man, if we just wouldn't have made some of the mistakes we made and finished a couple of those drives early, maybe it's a different game. But their secondary struggled a lot at times this year, and I think that was it really got exposed. It got exposed really against Tuscola the week before, and then these guys were even had even more athleticism in their receiving core and a quarterback with an equally strong arm, and that was trouble for them.
Yeah, and not to look ahead, but we'll look ahead.
Look ahead if we want to, yeah.
Seeing that matchup with Tuscola, which really I think is going to be, they were really good this year, but you think, you have Nick Bates coming back, and you have a lot of those pieces that are, freshmen and sophomores that are playing. It's kind of like, Moreau, where they have a lot of really young pieces. I think if they do both end up in 2A next year, they've been missed each other sometimes in the playoffs. But I think if you get that matchup again in the playoffs next year, I think right now Tuscola is favored. Nick Bates just incredible this year.
You look at some of the 2A teams that we had in our area this year with Moroa. They're going to have to replace Hockaday, but they have some pretty good. That sophomore class, their underclasses are really good. Then you have I think right now Bates you would say is almost a runaway favorite for Player of the Year next year.
Sure.
And Tuscola has, like you said, they have a lot coming back. They have Dalton Hole and Caleb Williams is back. They have a lot of good players there. And then Sangamon Valley
Yeah.
has most of that team back that played Monroe pretty well in the second round of the playoffs. So, yeah, I think that's, there's a lot of power. Those are going to be powerhouses next year in 2A. It's going to be a lot of fun. Next year, I think, is shaping up to where you had some teams that are going to mature into something really special.
And I'll throw Arcola in for 1A, which has a ton of talent returning too.
And St. Teresa in 3A.
Yeah. But to move on to basketball, we're right in the swing of things. We got Turkey Tournament, which MacArthur, comes out and has 3 really solid wins to where they win the Turkey Tournament. It hasn't been done in nearly 20 years for MacArthur. So you kind of had this team where it was like, okay, you have Bartley leaving, and you think, there are pieces, but you don't know necessarily how they're going to fill the void, because Marcus did a whole lot for that team. He handled the ball, just his court vision, and then the leadership aspect. And I think you had kind of different people taking, a chunk here and a chunk there, and they picked it up. And I was really impressed with MacArthur all the way throughout the tournament.
Right, and I saw him in the finals, and I think one thing I heard you saying the other day, Aaron, was that it always seemed like MacArthur would hit a game where, they would play it through some stretches where they played really well, then they would hit a game where it just didn't happen. They just didn't show up. And I thought that was the difference this year. It was a consistent effort through the 3 games. And I think another thing we've seen is that team around Marcus a lot of times could be frustrating. They were inconsistent, and you would see flashes out of Kamari Jones and flashes out of Kemontae Johnson, those 2 in particular, and Dallas McClain and Chantrez Spates. Those guys all seem to grow up. They all kind of grew up and filled the role they needed to on this team at the right time.
Especially Kamari Jones.
Yeah, especially Kamari Jones. But I thought Kemontae Johnson in that championship game really started. You started going, uh-oh. This guy could be a star, and there was a stretch in the second quarter of that game where he carried them, and I think maybe it was the third quarter of that game where he really carried them, and you're like, man, this guy, this is a pretty scary player when he's on like this. So yeah, and then like you said, Kamari Jones is definitely more of a leader. I think Chantrez Spates is filling his role well. They have a good deep bench like MacArthur usually does, but it seems like they're just more consistent all around this year. I think they're going to. The Central State 8 is going to have some problems with MacArthur. There's on a lot of nights.
I think people, the old Central State 8 probably thought, okay, Lanphier and Lincoln. That's going to be those 2 teams. But MacArthur, I think. It's hard to say anyone's the favorite right now because it's too early in the season. We've only played a handful of games, but they're in that conversation with those 2 right now for sure. I think easily. You look at Eisenhower, who had a pretty good tournament as well.
Right. I think with MacArthur, real quick, size, it has been every year that I've been in Decatur, is an issue. There are going to be nights when somebody can, utilize their post better than some of the teams in the Turkey Tournament did to beat them. But they do have a good plan against it, and their athleticism will give a lot of big guys trouble. So I do think that's somewhere that MacArthur will at times be exposed, but for the most part, they have a lot to combat that.
I will say, I don't think, unless there's someone that's like 7'2", Kemontae Johnson can hold his own against anybody defensively. You look at, he had a block on the 6'9" Darius Owsley from Southeast. He was, played against Bolingbrook, who had a D1 6'9" player. He was really playing well defensively in the post. And he's 5 inches short. He's looking up at these other guys and able to hold his own well. But yeah, I think just that if they get that half-court offense rolling, and they did really well in this tournament, I think this is going to be a really complete team because you already have that transition offense. You have, the defense which is so good. I really like this MacArthur team.
You mentioned Eisenhower. They went 1-2 in the tournament. Won on the first night, beating Lanphier to get to the winners bracket. I think that win right there, even though they didn't quite play as well in the next 2 games, so they did compete. Mm-hmm. I think that just tells you right there. Lanphier is going to be one of the. They might not be as good as some people predicted they would be in the CSA, but they're going to be one of the top 5 teams.
Sure.
And as Eisenhower proved they can hang with them and even beat them. So, with Rodney Walker, and he says it, there's going to be growing pains. This team has a long way to go. They're young. Their 2 best players are sophomores in Stephon Bobbitt and Stephon Jarrett. But you could see at times, and it wasn't all the time, but you could see flashes of what those guys are going to be, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, even that game against Bolingbrook, the semifinal game, to where I mean, they were really within a bucket for most of the game, for about 30 minutes. I mean, they were right there. And that's a team that has, I mean, it's kind of like, we said MacArthur and Eisenhower. They just don't have a ton of size. And they were able to get around that. I mean, they were able to shoot the ball well in the perimeter and kind of keep that going. And I think, as Eisenhower continues to just get that chemistry, working well together, they learn what Randy Walker, wants to do, and they can execute it really well. I think Eisenhower is definitely top half of that conference right now. There
are plenty of wins on their schedule.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure they're going to be in the conference, but there are plenty of teams that they're going to beat. Yeah. This isn't 3-4 win Eisenhower anymore. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So looking ahead to the Macon County tournament, which is going to start this Monday, I think it's a little loaded this year. I mean, I think you have Warrensburg, who went to the sectional finals last year. They bring so many back. Obviously that junior class that has so many talented players, and they add another in Will Gustafson, who's a Pleasant Plains transfer. I think between Warrensburg and then you have Meridian, Sangamon Valley, Argenta with Keegan McHood is coming back, and I know St. Teresa's always good. They had a great first win against St. Thomas More. I think especially those top five. I mean, I think you're looking at Maroa and A&M and Saragordo all have really talented players as well. I think it's going to be a really great tournament this coming up this week, and Warrensburg has I think a lot to like about him.
Well, we know Warrensburg has the most coming back. Also, with Vic Binkley, he loves to win this tournament. This is his thing. He definitely likes to win. I mean, that Warrensburg Meridian, I think that's what the matchup we'll get in the finals, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I think that we're going to see that matchup a few times this year, and that's one I want to see a bunch of times. Yeah. That's going to be a lot of fun. So I think we all agree that those are the two best teams in this tournament, and I think two of the better teams in the area. I think where you and I disagree is the number 3. I know you kind of seeded it out, and I did. I think St. Teresa, with that win they had against Champaign and St. Thomas More, there's not a lot to go on early. You kind of have to go on well. Obviously, St. T loses, 2 of their better players from last year, including the best player in the area, in Christian Williams. But there's, I think that win and some of the younger players they have coming up sort of gives them that 3 spot. Sangamon Valley did have the win against Maroa, and obviously has a lot coming back from last year. So I can see your argument for them as 3, but I think my guess, and we'll know by the time you watch this, we'll know what happened. I think St. T gets the vote of the coaches in this.
It's you look at Meridian, a team like Meridian, which you kind of thought, okay, that they had that big junior class. You had a couple seniors, and they were steady, consistent, and but then you had a couple of sophomores in Quan Bradford and Lane Kircher, who have both had 20-plus point games. Look at that youth on that team. I think once you start, really getting those guys, kind of in the offense with the rest of those juniors at Meridian, I think that's going to be a really dangerous team. I think you said, having a Warrens-Meridian matchup, I always say is likely. I do like Sangamon Valley. I think that you look at just the consistency. I mean, those guys have been playing since, for a couple of years now on varsity. The Hutchins can score anywhere on the floor, and Jimmy Staub is somebody you can watch out for too. I think that. We're waiting to see what the seeds are. I think that's kind of what we're waiting for, which are supposed to be coming out today as we're talking. But I think looking at that top half of the bracket, you have a lot of teams that are able to win regional titles out of that group, and I mean maybe they'll match up later on down the road. But like you said, I think maybe an early statement here, and maybe Meridian has an edge because they're one of the few teams in this tournament that has played a Thanksgiving tournament. That they have some games under their belt already. A lot of these games or teams only have maybe 1 or 2 games so far, which I mean is the difference is negligible, but I think it's significant. Just even in this early going.
And don't forget, Argenta played in the championship of this tournament last year.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a great season after that, but boy, they started out well, and the pieces are there. Connor Damery's healthy again, and they have McHood, who will be healthy. That's a pretty good 1-2 combo, and I still don't know that there's a better post in the county tournament than Keegan McHood, or even in the Central Illinois Conference, or they're in the LVC. But or in the LVC, so that's a pretty good player there, and so I think they're dangerous. But I definitely, Warrensburg, Meridian. If this is the first of 3 matchups, that's great. Maybe in the CIC tournament, they face each other. Maybe somehow in the postseason they face each other. If they played 5 times this year, I'm okay with that. I want to see, all the Vic versus Blake I can, and all of the while we still can, and then all of the talented players on both of those teams. I think that's a fun matchup. It always has been since I've been in this area, and I'll love to see it some more.
And it was funny. I was talking to Blake. He said Vic Binkley would love to play Meridian 10 times a year. Like, he likes playing those kind of teams over and over, and Blake hates it. He's like, I want to play different teams. So it's a very, it's a fun, different contrast of styles with the two of the, being familiar with the team, because you're going to see them probably in playoff time, or getting that experience somewhere else and seeing different styles of play. But we'll have plenty of basketball coverage here coming up this week for Macon County Tournament. And then, of course, we have postseason awards for the fall season. You're talking about cross country and soccer and volleyball and football. That's all coming up very soon. Look for this weekend for cross country and soccer. So make sure you check that out. Check out hrpreps.com. We'll have coverage of all the games, and we'll see you out there.